Greetings, night owls. Here's my top-tailed rendering of part 10 of the seemingly never-ending interviews with Shaun Attwood from his well-known channel. A far more professional channel than mine, yet perhaps with less time sprinkling backgrounds and effects, in which Shaun and I relax into the ongoing details of my misadventures. Part 10 wanders in, always a little slow to pick up, and beyond my dealings with the Taliban in the 1990s, when they had that name, but to me were just a bunch of familiar faces, with a slight change of dress code. Black is always fashionable. The little black dress. Anyway, they didn't have that much of a sense of humour. Well, they did, but they lost it. Having to pretend to be something you're not. It actually rubs off. It's a bit like if you're in a nut house, and the only way to get out is to pretend that you're normal. Well, you do it, and you get out, but it kind of rubs off, and you stay normal. Well, there you are. That's the theory of psychoanalysis and psychological treatment, psychiatric treatment, really, in brief. Oh, except psychiatric, they're allowed to use drugs. Wow. Yes, and back to the video. They were, the Taliban, that is, and are a loose collection of criminal gangs without a job, somehow, this was back then, feeling their way as new rulers. Indeed, as Taliban 1, as I call them, they were totally clueless in the wreckage of Afghanistan then. Of course, a few stonings, a bit of show for foreign news crews, but business went on. It usually does. A massive tax on opium and heroin, of course, did not go, well, farther than the families' houses of the bosses. Is it good to compare Taliban 1 with the Taliban 2 of 2021? A few of the old faces, but mostly the sons of old tribals. Still clueless and now struggling to get relief money unfrozen. I'll join you at half-time.
Part 10! 10! Would you believe it?
A subdued announcement from my host here, trying to tell you that this is part 10 of David and Shaun and my scurrilous adventures.
You would never guess that he was a TV presenter in his childhood.
At 12 years old. And I had learnt to read the news, so and they didn't have auto cues in those days. So you actually had to scan a couple of lines. It was quite a challenge. Oh, I've knocked the table. I'm not allowed to do that. So all is well here at the studio, and you've had an earlier guest, a man who solves his problems with the fist.
Indeed, we had a boxer on who spent time in the UK prison system. But for people who are not familiar with David, there's a reason he's back for the 10th time. By far the biggest story on the channel. We're not talking just one prison experience in one country. We are talking prison experiences on 5 continents. The man, the only Westerner to escape from death row in Thailand. Tortured in Karachi. And on and on and on and on it goes until we get up to episode 20. After which we're going to have to rely on your questions to keep us going.
You think? Perhaps I can reveal what I've really been up to since my retirement. But, in fact, I'm using my misadventures to some purpose. Actually threw out a video on my own channel, which a handful of people watch.
Please go in the description box and check out David's channel and subscribe. We need to get him up to over 10,000 subs. What are you at now?
Just about 6,000.
Cool.
So it's not too bad. And I thought, did you ever get this viral kind of video passed on through WhatsApp? You know how your ex-friends keep sending you these things, forwarding their little jokey, funny messages. This one was some guy sitting in his car bitching about coke dealers around town, saying how much rubbish it was. And I got it 4 times. Now, what that means, viewers, is that if I get it 4 times, that's probably from a different pool of friends, that famous 6 degrees of separation. So I haven't actually come across anybody who hasn't seen it. You may not have, because you're chained to your desk here and on your other secret channel, YouTube B or whatever it's called. But so I thought, if he can sit there complaining about the quality of the pub grub that he's forced to buy, I thought I invited the viewers to solve the problem by going over to Colombia and bringing back a load, even though I did warn them that it's against the law and they shouldn't do it. But I'm kind of footfalling them through the thing at the moment.
What have you been doing on your channel lately?
Advice.
About how to stay out of jail, of course.
Exactly. Well, I
by not getting involved in crime, of course.
Indeed.
Not tips for smugglers.
But, I find the best way is to be enthusiastic in the beginning. Then once you point out all the pitfalls, look at the wreckage that 45 years in the trade's done to me. And people kind of feel, yes, they'll change their mind by themselves. It's no use. You remember those posters years ago? There was a thing around, I think about 20 years ago, featuring the junkie. And it was a big poster for people. And this guy was a wreck. He made Sid Vicious look like sort of Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Lived under a bridge and he shoplifted.
Oh, well, he was kind of like a punk rocker in this style. Now, all it ended up was this poster was on the bedroom door of half the teenage boys and girls around the country. So they just didn't get it. You can't say to people, don't do such and such, or this is a bad thing. It's a conclusion they'll have to come to themselves. It's like parents who go on about smoking and drinking, If they sit there like mine did and get drunk in front of their children, you kind of get the message yourself. But just to clarify, if you've walked in on episode 10, yes, I had went out as a teenager. I started out in safecracking, Shaun. We haven't even gone into that.
So we could go back and start again. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it was kind of short-lived because most of the safecrackers had kind of retired, and there was a bit of a challenge between the manufacturers of the safes and us. The rule was never leave the lid of the safe behind. When you open it up, unbolt it and take it with you, because if you leave the wreckage, they'll work out how you got in. But people are nervous, careless, enjoying their loot, or disappointed at finding an empty safe, and stomp off into the night, leaving the evidence. Now, the way back in those days was to drill a tiny hole through the front. Now, those tumbler combination safes, people always seem to be interested in the technicalities, don't they?
They are. There's
a series of discs behind that tumbler, and as you go 23 left, 42 right, it pushes one of the discs this way and the next one that way, and there's a groove in them. If you line up all the grooves in the disc, you can turn the handle, the bolt will drop into it, and then you can open it up. So you can imagine if we could drill in, we had to use a cystoscope. This was in the days, this was mid-70s, before microscopic cameras and such like. But the cystoscope was the horrible instrument that gentlemen had to have inserted into them if they'd had a memento from Asia, shall we say, from some liaison there, and the inside needed examining. It wasn't that small, but you could see how these things lined up.
Not the umbrella scrape thing.
I don't think that's been used since, it was still around when I was a young man, but then again, so was the horseless carriage. It never worked anyway, did it? And mercury treatment, that was another cure for syphilis that never did any good. So Oh, by the way, what they did, the safe companies, when they realized what we were doing, was put in what we called a crunchy bar. It was another disc, but of very strong metals like tungsten mixed with Teflon, so that when your drill bit went in to make the hole to have a look, it would strike the hard stuff and twist on the soft stuff and snap. And once it snapped, you're gone. You can try and drill another hole, but it won't do any good because it's all bunged up. And that was in reaction to what we did. And of course, police do the same thing, don't they? They react. But so it was out of that and then into smuggling in general, everything from gold video heads and inevitably narcotics, which was where the fun began. I ended up getting a big sentence in Australia, 10 years, survived that, out of Supermaxes, headed for Thailand. That all fell to pieces, almost sentenced to death, a couple of weeks off it, escaped from there, built a new life. I guess this is the point of our interviews, isn't it? The lives keep getting crushed down, and I'll kind of manufacture a new David out of the ashes.
Please let us know in the comments what you think the point of David's interviews is. Thank you.
Well, it's insomnia for people who have no lives, I guess. But then again, you amongst your, what is it, close to 500,000 subscribers?
Over now.
It's got to be impressive. There are no doubt some quite sensible people who are still asking themselves at 3 o'clock in the morning why they're watching, but nonetheless. I found myself what I thought was a sanctuary in Pakistan, in the tribal lands in Baluchistan. But things, of course, got complicated after I broke the other rule, which is when you've retired, don't go running around playing, I don't know, hero in any sense. And when I tried and more or less succeeded in getting a kidnapped friend out of trouble there, Iftaka, he was the nephew of a guy that had saved me a few times. This is Mir Nurjan Magsi, head of the Magsi clan, tribal chieftain. And why his little cousin ended up, or nephew, I mean, ended up stuck out there is in the very complex. Everything in not only the law, the interactions between people. I mean, in the nations of Great Britain, we have Scotland, Wales, and so on, but the differences there are huge. There's an independence movement in Karachi linked to the Sindh province, and Sindhi is a language. Baluchistan, another language, another province. I guess it was only unified in some sense by the Indian Empire, and that was artificial, wasn't it? So when the British scampered away, and in the usual fashion, what's the best way to get out of what could be potentially a great power and potential rival is to make a mess of it. So they went along with the dear departed Ali Jinnah, who founded Pakistan, said, yes, you can have a Muslim homeland. All of you lot in India, or the millions of Muslims, you just move over here and the Hindus can move over there. What was it, 8 million dead in the process, properties burnt, riots, all of that. And if that wasn't mess enough, the lasting legacy of Kashmir, which was owned by some huge nabob up there and ended up splitting it between India and Pakistan. And they're still at war to this day over that, high up in the mountains. Job done there.
And the Brits had to walk away from the opium business, did they?
Kinda. A lot of it was in Burma anyway, and that fell to its own problems. But there's still illegal opium growers there in India. They've got many fields. But then again, so many places. You know, in Tasmania, in Australia, they have opium fields there. legal ones, to manufacture, morphine? Yes, a little, but mostly codeine. Across England, people will know, over-the-counter codeine tablets are a big favourite at your local chemist. In fact, a huge amount of it is sold. Let's imagine taking the amount of codeine that's sold and turning it, dividing it by 10 to work out the morphine amount that went into making that codeine. Probably 2 tons of heroin a year is consumed over the counter indirectly by the worried suburbanites who have back pain. And I think the UK is one of the few places where you can buy a mixture of paracetamol and codeine. 12.75 milligrams is the maximum in one pill that is allowed to be sold. Extraordinarily, Boots the chemist sell a 12.75 milligram tablet at the maximum, and they're obliged to advise people not to take it for more than 3 days. Yeah, that's good advice.
So who was the biggest trafficker in the history of the world then? Queen Victoria and the British Empire, or Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel?
Oh, he was just a cheap cigarette smuggler by comparison. That's where he started, and in the eyes of empire, that's where he stays. He didn't know how to do it properly, really, did he? He ended up... well, you'd know better than I.
He didn't have any battleships, did he?
How many spies did he have in his own network over the years before his fall?
How many spies?
Yeah, how many traitors?
In his own network. His problem was, when he built the prison for himself and went into the cathedral prison, he started to cannibalize his own men. And then his own men got scared and went to the Cali cartel and turned on him.
But he became paranoid about them and turned on them, or you mean something else?
He said to his brother, when his brother asked him, why would you kill the Moncada and the Galliano factions when they were our friends? They'd like been at each other's weddings and godfathers and all that stuff. Pablo's response was, some people are like cattle. You let them grow fat before you slaughter them.
It's a charming analogy there. Of course, if you want to know anything or everything about Pablo Escobar, who can I think of that Shaun knew? Shaun, you've got, I think, 6 or 7 books related to him.
And I just interviewed his son.
Yes.
Should be up soon. By the time people are watching this, it should be up.
I saw the teaser to it. Very slick. Had me in, spooked.
James.
Very professional.
James is teaser kingpin now.
Yes, I can, on my humble little suite, I can never catch up with your slick professionalism. But
talking about slick professionalism, you've got a glowing purple cover to Unforgiving Destiny this evening.
This is a kind of
never seen that
a proof edition.
Purple one before.
Was full of mistakes that I corrected.
There's 2 books on Amazon that David would appreciate you buying.
This one
from himself, signed. Send him a message. He loves going to the post office.
Yes, you can.
Can I have a look at the present?
Yeah, have a flip through that.
Wow.
What I do is, you send me a little information about yourself, your darkest secrets, if you wish, and I'll write something personal in a copy of it and send it to you. So, people used to, when they were troubled and didn't know where to turn to, they used to drop the Bible open and randomly point a finger, like some old sailors used to do with an atlas. You could, if troubled and not knowing where to turn to, take Unforgiving Destiny, drop it open, and point a finger, and it'll tell you where not to go. So you've eliminated something there.
Speaking of old sailors, have you watched this movie, The Lighthouse?
No, I've seen it up there. Is it worth it?
Yeah.
People go crazy in a lighthouse. Is that the
a lot of old sailor language in it.
Right. Yeah. I think porridge for prison time is a sailor's one. Of course, that's what they used to feed them, or a kind of a gruel. But that certainly goes back to that time. I've had barely time to watch anything, really. Not terribly impressed with the things I do. But
You're not watching any series on Netflix?
I don't think really nothing stands out that was really good.
Queen of the South? Cartel chasing?
My wife really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And by the way, their dubbing's getting better too, because that's in Spanish originally, wasn't it?
I don't know. Is it? Was it?
I think it is.
There's just little parts are in Spanish, not the majority of it.
Right. Well, they put a.
What about The Last Kingdom?
Worth it again, is that?
There's a new season coming up, I think. And there's a new season of Ozark coming up.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I caught a thing called Cut Bank the other night.
Cut Bank.
A bit like the Coen brothers stuff. They always have small town weirdos. Somebody tries on something, a caper gone wrong, all of that kind of stuff. One of these days, you will have amassed enough, and probably have already, to start thinking of writing fiction or something.
Yeah, if there's enough time in the day to write fiction. What I've started to do now is publish books for other people. So about 12 of our true crime guests are publishing the books through me now. If anyone out there's published and wants a republishing done, and we are doing a few books from scratch, hard-hitting true crime only, then get in touch. Gadfly Press.
Yes, your story should have as much action in it as possible. Things happen to
From
people.
page one.
From page one. In fact, if the most interesting thing that ever happened to you is an event and surprising, put it on page one. Anyway, leave it to Shaun. He knows his way around, and you'll probably, in fact, certainly get a better deal from him than a standard publishers. I know people who even still have agents. I ran across a guy called Peter Tritton. He ended up doing, 9 years?
Yeah, his Vice videos gone viral, hasn't it?
Yes, it had. And
Posh Pete.
Well, he's sort of looking a bit kind of puny Pete at the moment because what tuberculosis that he picked up.
From that foreign prison experience. Yeah, that was
it's
harrowing.
Still eating away at him. But I'm going to do a Skype call with him.
Is that going to go on your channel?
It'll go on the
Excellent.
channel. So it'll probably be, all the other things I put there, you would want to stick on yours.
Is he at a secret location these days?
He was for about a year.
Yeah.
He had completely innocently happened to be at somebody's place when the door got kicked in.
Oh.
That happens. And so he went quiet after a while there. But he had a book out, unwisely titled something in Spanish like El Infierno, in hell.
Yeah.
And, of course, it's like scientists who write books. If they put a mathematical symbol in the book anywhere, it'll go no place. Who was that floppy-haired Manchester twat scientist? He published E = MC squared. It sold. Nobody read it. But, So where was I last time? Now
You're out on bail in Karachi.
Okay. What was I doing there? I was facing 2 sets of charges over the same incident where one of my old pals found himself arrested there with a few kilos of heroin and couldn't think of anybody to blame except for me. So he talked me up, and that's why I ended up in the prison and kind of mistreated there. Not so much in the prison, but by the arresting police. But finally, it came to trial, and I was acquitted by an honest judge. Well, as I've explained before, all the proceedings are in English in Indian and Pakistan courts, something that takes people by surprise. And I think it's been a beneficial thing because there's all that history, isn't there, of the golden thread of British justice. So when they word their judgments, if there's no evidence, you should get out of it. That $20,000 I paid had nothing to do with the outcome of his ruling. So I then was facing the other, it was kind of like a federal charge of the same thing. Had to get bail on that. An Air Force captain that I'd met in one of the prisons arranged for the bail. I was bailed out, and even that wasn't easy. As I said, they just didn't want to let me go. And here I was, a free man. But here's the thing, Shaun. Oddly enough, in a life full of being pursued and chased and imprisoned, the most relaxing moments are when I'm kind of stuck in some foreign place, or foreign to me, and I can't really move, so I have to just enjoy it. And that's what I did. I moved into the penthouse apartment of a friend. Now, the friend, Robbie the Scot, he was on bail too, on a banking fraud case. Down on the coast in Pakistan, there's Gwadar Port, and long has been the plan to run a pipeline all the way from Kyrgyzstan down through Afghanistan to that port and scoop up all the natural gas that you can collect along the way. And financing that thing was going to require about $5 billion. So Robbie steps in, a man who can arrange a bit of finance, should you ever have such an enterprise, and was part of it required guarantors. So there are all kind of European property and hotels and other things were put up as guaranteeing not the $5 billion. You could never find enough property for that, but probably about $250 million in part of the loan that had to be repaid no matter what under different terms. Unfortunately for Robbie, just about the time that was going through, a couple of City of London policemen were there on another mission and looked at the documents that were part of this, because some competing policemen had been called by the bank. On top of the fax that was part of the guarantee papers was a fax header. Now, fax machines have gone with the wind, thank God, but they used to include the origin source of the fax machine and tiny little print across the top. Now, instead of the Habib Bank in Zurich, it read Pearl Continental Hotel, Karachi. Is not good. It kind of throws a spanner in the works there. So Robbie found himself being charged with fraudulently raising this money. He was bailed out himself. But being a man who puts together big deals, you have to look like a man who puts together big deals. So he went down to Clifton Beach. Sounds kind of English? I suppose so, because everybody spoke it down there. But in fact, it's a very well-known and posh suburb of Karachi. And there is a beach, and a few kind of tired-looking camels schlep up and down to take the kids around the place. And it was also the home territory of Benazir Bhutto, one of Pakistan's prime ministers. She assassinated, I don't know whose bomb it was. They probably all threw in their own couple of pound of Semtex in there to contribute to it. Her husband did get the blame, but I guess he was innocent because he later on became the president of Pakistan, even though he was 2 doors down from me in Karachi Central Jail. And a complete miser too, I should add. His Bangladeshi cook couldn't wait to get out of the place. Robbie had about 6 rooms in this penthouse. I took one of them and was, as I say, very relaxed. I got a big camera. I ran around taking pictures of all those tangled cables you get in the big city there. Started touring the countryside. I saw my captain friend. And then I think I'd mentioned, but not given a huge amount of detail, when I was in the jail just before my release, it's called Landy Prison, I'd come across an Englishman. His name was David also. Not also, but David. And he was facing 2 tons of hash accusation with the notorious drug organizer Akbar Shah. Akbar Shah is the man you go to if you want anything arranged from just about anywhere in that part of the world into Pakistan, and he could do it. Indeed, he could. Unfortunately for Akbar, if you give him the money for the deal, anything other than 2.5 seconds before it's about to take place, Akers will be straight into a casino and blow the lot. Now, this one went sour for some reason, but not to do with Akbar's carelessness exactly. It was a bit of a mystery. This David had been sent over from London. He was a jeweller, by the way, and quite a good one, to meet the waiter from Dubai who had the connection for the 2 tons of hash, and it was heading off to a country that I can't name because somebody could kind of put that together. And that's the trouble. Even though I sound like I'm rabbiting on, I'm very carefully selecting what clues I give the opposition, because you never know. There might be some retired plod out there who likes a crossword puzzle on a Sunday. So I'd spoken to this David, who was firmly in the clutches of old Akbar there, advised him to do nothing, just wait it out. The biggest to the lowest in this country, they make themselves comfortable and wait it out. Nope, he was in a hurry and arranged money from home. So what's that got to do with me? Well, his wife was on the phone to me, and when I was in Clifton Beach, and to Robbie, because we were outside and we could help. But really what we were trying to do was to prevent her from selling the family home in Croydon and sending loads of money. Explained very clearly that if you send money for a start, that's it, it's gone. Doesn't matter who it was, to where, to when. You can come here with some money and you don't need much and help. But she was insisting on coming over to help him, and she did. So I was waiting to get some new passports, and even one in my own name. I don't know quite where I saw the logic of that, but I think I wanted to test the waters to see whether the Interpol warrants had been lifted. Short answer to cut a couple of steps ahead. No, they damn well hadn't been. The Thailand escape thing was still floating around. So, with this time on my hands, even though I tried to put her off, nonetheless she was determined to come, and arrived with their 2 daughters, who were 12 and 7 at the time, little Ellie and slightly older Sophia. So I go to the airport and to pick them up, and they come out like they're on holiday or something like that. Trolleys, all twisted wheels. You can imagine Karachi airport, all those airport touts trying to descend on them, to eat them alive. And I picked them up, and we'd arranged a hotel for them. I must say the little girls looked up at me and looked kind of disappointed. I think I'd been talked up, but because of all the history, but that my harshest critics are the most realistic ones. In that age, they're very realistic. Had them secured and arranged a better hotel than the one that Robbie had got for them, someplace a bit out of town. It's the Carlton down by the marina, if you're ever there. It's owned by the military, and so very peaceful. You won't get any trouble from there.
Do they let you in if you've got an Interpol record?
They don't care if you've got an LP record of the Sergeant Pepper's on bootleg. They'll let you. They really don't mind that. Run by an Austrian, where it was back at that time. But Nurjan, who'd found me when I was in the dungeon in Hyderabad prison and got my case back on the rails so that I could be found not guilty and released. He was at a kind of loose end. And now this is a man, you might recall, who was still on a never-ending case that was, I think, 14 years old at the time, still running in the courts, of the September 30 massacre, where 130 people died. He had his own bits of smuggling and interests, everything from little illegal stills to solving problems for people, which usually involved the very dry deserts of Balochistan, that kind of problem solving. But he had some mutual friends who had put up their houses as a guarantee, and then you couldn't contact them. But sure enough, their signatures were on these guarantee things for these properties. Oh, and they also put a thumbprint down there as well. So they must have been alive, we all assume, for that to be going on. A meeting was arranged. Now, you can imagine there's Nurjan with his retinue, with his protectors, and the other leader wasn't tribal at all. He was kind of Sindhi province, another cutthroat. And they all have their own political party. You can imagine if you're, I suppose there's comparisons with Russia here, they're gangsters, but they're politicians at the same time. I went to the so-called peace brokering meeting with Nurjan and a very dark-eyed guy. He looked a bit like, who was that terrorist that ended up being waterboarded 130 times or something? Sharif was his name? I don't know. Anyway, he was supposedly involved in 9/11 bombing, but he looked very similar to him. Now, you don't have to follow Sindhi or Urdu too well to know when a meeting's not going really great. So I thought, well, I'll leave this in a very dank house, heavy curtains, heavy furniture. Now, the fact that there was plastic covering over all the sofas didn't mean anything like it might mean in Mexico. It was just that they protect their furniture that way. So I went for a bit of a wander around the house, supposedly looking for the toilet, kind of looking for any helpful clues as to whether something really bad was going to happen then. It seemed not. There was a couple of the other guys, men, who were bottling up some local vodka. But they must have been kind of low rent, Nurjan's hooch at least had labels on it. This stuff just had smoky, barely cleaned out, reused bottles. And then there were a few in the fridge, and on the freezer side there were a bunch of, looked like pigeons or something. I remember asking after the meeting, Nurjan, if there was any game fowl around, but they all just looked puzzled to me. And why am I saying this? This has some significance later on. The supposedly peace was made, and I then went to keep with Nurjan for a couple of days. I'd been up to Lahore and then to Faisalabad to look at things, and was then called away by the Air Force captain. I said, David, I found just what you want. A place where you can do any kind of business you like. So we all set off to Afghanistan, crossed over the border in not along the coast, but up a bit west from Quetta. Into there, we had what I'm sure was somebody else from the army with us, and I'm sure was also somebody who had connections with, to use the word terrorist is probably wrong. I mean, a powerful group. What does it mean? And terrorist is the word we put on people who are, the organizers of half-wits who will strap on a vest and go and get themselves killed. But when we got over the border, I was taken to a small town, and you could see that there was almost nothing there. The people barely came out. But I was assured that I could set up any operation I want, any kind, even build a landing strip. Now, here's the thing. I didn't really want to do very much of this at this stage. I mean, I've had 2 decades of endless warring. But some of these people have helped me, and the strategy, of course, is to appear a little bit interested. But I did... here's a tester. For any of you out there who feel like you're in a very strange place and you can't tell anything, but all the people around you are giving you great assurances, you know what you do? You ask. You feel like going for a walk in the local town. They'll all go rigid and won't like the idea much, but you insist because, what did you say to me, Captain? That I am law here? Well, first rule of law is to go for a stroll, which I did, and was kind of attracted to some fizzing noises behind a large steel compound shed. When I say steel, corrugated tin, but kind of painted black. And walking through the slits, I could see some young guys looking rather conservative, black outfits again, having fun and games with a long, industrial eyedropper. They're about 2 foot long, putting drops of something or other into a large rubbish bin lid or tray, and it goes bang and explodes and all of that. Okay, so I took that in. Wished everybody well, went back to town. Now, the next person that these memories have significance to is when I was at the Hyatt Hotel picking up my dry cleaning. Now, everybody who's anybody gets their dry cleaning done at the Hyatt Hotel, because everywhere else they just take your clothes, spray a bit of petrol over it and put it through the press. But the Hyatt actually has dry cleaning solution. The kind of tips you learn when you're a local. And I ran across Jeremy, from one of the vice consuls from the British High Commission in Karachi. Jeremy, got a few minutes? My dry cleaning's not ready. Is that what you're here for, the dry cleaning, or just to snoop on people in the foyer? So we chatted for a few minutes, and I said, Jeremy, look, it's very hard to pass on a message without being questioned as to why you're passing on this message. And if you're suspicious about the messenger, fine. But here it is for what it's worth. I was doing a bit of a cook's tour of the area, and beyond the area, you could say, beyond the borders. And I came across some young men. And you know what they were doing? What? They were having some fun with peroxide and sodium permanganate, because it's what the you remember, it wasn't the V2 rocket, but the Messerschmitt during the war put out a kind of fast launch little rocket that was supposed to go up and shoot at planes. It never, it did get off the ground, but really landed in one piece. It used what they called, I think it was B-Stoff and Z-Stoff, which was a combination of liquid fuels. If you put them together, they explode. And hydrogen peroxide is one, and the sodium permanganate is another. And I was pretty sure that's what it was, because they're relatively, not say easy to get, they're possible to get in industrial quantities. And what's it to him, said Jeremy? Well, the thing is, it does occur to me that if you were of this kind of persuasion, and you wanted to get onto a plane, for example, with something that wasn't metal and wasn't in itself an explosive, you could strap on a couple of jellied containers of this, and as soon as you tear something or rip something and the two bits meet together, that would be the end of that plane. Now, you'd think, wouldn't you, that having tipped somebody who's got his ear to the spook central would think this, worth doing something about. When he gave me a very suspicious look, I said, look, frankly, the reason I'm telling you this is because if there's anything to it, and if it comes to anything, can you imagine what it's like for a smuggler to get on a plane? There'll be a bit of checking going on, don't you think? So, I had perfectly, valid reasons for bringing this up. But as far as I know, absolutely nothing was done with that information. And it doesn't surprise me because almost every time, whether it be the DEA and drugs or Western investigation agencies, they're all running their own games, their own private business, their own power struggles within their agencies. They're not seekers of truth or something new. If it was something, if I'd told him that at the British High Commission in Islamabad that Sarah, the secretary, was on with the head consul there, then that would have been something he would have soaked up. But, I kind of left the Hyatt with my dry cleaning thinking, I've broken my own rule here, which is that T-shirt that says almost everything is not worth saying. And certainly that wasn't particularly. But I had quite a few things to do in my little relaxed life. I had Jeanette and the two girls to more or less entertain. I brought them round to the penthouse and made them a chicken dinner. You had to buy the chickens locally. I don't know if you've ever done it in... I don't think they do in Mexico or South America. But when you go to buy a chicken for cooking in Karachi, you go to the market and the chickens are all running around in a cage. Nobody local would ever buy one that they hadn't seen running around in a cage. Who knows what it might be or how sick it is. So I tried to, I knew what was coming next. You buy the chicken, the guy cuts its throat and bleeds it off in a big 44-gallon. So my idea of lightening it in for the little girls didn't work terribly well because I gave all the chickens names. And when I selected that one, I'm sure all the other chickens ran over to the other side of the cage. They knew what the pointing finger meant. That's the end of that chicken. And the chicken I'd chosen, I called Joe. No offense there. He didn't seem to know what was going on. And the dumber chickens were sort of saying, what's happening with Joe? No, there was no Joe. There was never any Joe. So Joe gets pulled out of this thing, head cut off, bled out, because that's it makes it sort of kosher or, halal, yes. And then stripped of its entire skin. Oh, you don't pluck the feathers. The whole skin goes off, feathers and all. That's thrown back into this horrible oil drum, which has got chickens' heads in it and plenty of flies. And next minute, you've got two plastic bags, one with the chicken meat on it and the other one with the giblets, still warm. Did they eat my roast chicken? Oddly enough, they did. So there was a very strange life in the country at that time. I'm still not free to go. I haven't got the documentation. Some days I'm with, in the penthouse being all civilized, and the next minute I'm out in some kind of weird place. In fact, I'd looked around for people that might make Jeanette a bit less nervous of being, but she wasn't at all. I don't think I don't think she felt any fear. You know, people would be fearful that they might be grabbed or robbed or something like that. Now, that really couldn't happen in the kind of places we were. But the closest I could find for company, at the hairdresser at the Hotel Carlton was a woman, Mira. She kind of did this as a hobby. But we went to her house and her husband, and they were a kind of Karachi aristocracy, big Palladian white mansion somewhere. But they were kind of a bit witchy. You know? Jeanette and I had got the idea that these people were sorcerers in their spare time and sort of made jokes. Did you ever see Rosemary's Baby?
Oh yes, that was one of the very first horror movies I ever watched.
When the neighbors were Roman and I forget the woman's name, but they had them over for dinner, the new couple, and they'd taken pictures off the wall, and there were kind of pale spots where you could see pictures had been taken off the wall, and there were some in this house, so something had come down, you know. And when the hairdresser woman was saying she didn't like somebody, you know, gesturing to Jeanette, cuts the hair off in the salon, takes the hair, makes the spell. And there was visiting her husband down at the in court. Now, he should have been going to court, as I was, as a B-class prisoner, which, of those who weren't there when I was explaining that, is A-class is only political, but B-class, you don't have handcuffs, you don't have chains. You have your own servants in the prison, and there are other prisoners, of course. And your guard is more of to guard your safety against riffraff who might come and importune upon you in the courtroom or environs, which is, you know, there are a lot of would-be lawyers there. But Jeanette's husband was not like this. He was still handcuffed, literally and figuratively, to Akbar Shah. And I kind of looked at Akbar. I thought, now what's going on? Why hasn't he organized? I mean, he was living right out of the prison. He had his own kind of room and his own people. But his wife was outside, Akbar Shah's wife, controlling the purse strings and wasn't letting him have much money. So I kind of wondered where the £20,000 went to that had already been sent over to take care of things. I think it was a psychological thing to keep David, who was facing this 2 tons of hash charge, well under thumb. Let the chains stay on. Let the conditions be a bit tough. Don't make him feel like he can wait it out. Because back in the cell at night, he was kind of winding him up a bit, saying, we have to act now. And no, nobody says that. You have to have lunch now. You don't act anywhere. And David was kind of embarrassed, I guess, and was almost kind of giggling, but organizing his shopping and whatever was needed for the day. And I didn't show myself that day. I was lurking in the shadows. I thought it would be more embarrassing, don't you think? If you've met some guy in prison, his wife's come over to, let's say you're in Mexico, you're taking care of the wife in an honest sort of way. You don't want to go down to and watch him chained up and say, look at me, I've got out, I've got your wife. Let them get on with it. If you want to see that nothing untoward happens, you have to lurk in the shadows for that one, which is what I did. But anyway, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. The pool was nice at the Carlton Hotel. I didn't meet Nurjan down at one of his little investments, which was a Subway branch franchise down there. And Kamran was with us, who is his kind of chief bodyguard, though a bit suspiciously tangled up in the nephew going missing. But that's the way it is here, isn't it? I mean, in the last, 15 minutes, I've talked about 5 or 6 sets of people, all with different motives. Everything they're showing is for a different purpose. But that night at Subway, it wasn't anything but the most clear purpose, which was shown. Nurjan and I were down, they're kind of long corridor affairs, the Subway shop. We were down at a table, which is anchored to the ground. Facing the door is... Do you find yourself doing that? You go into a place, you have ended up with the seat facing the door?
My preference is back to the wall, facing the door, probably.
Do you ever check out the exits anymore? We're not worried about the way out the back.
No, I've calmed down enough not to look for exits.
Well, why break an old habit? Which is what I had not done that night. Even though I didn't have to go to the loo, I went out the back to see that there really wasn't one there. Remember, Nurjan had just made peace with somebody. That's when you're most dangerous. A man came in, and something about him didn't look like a Subway customer. He wasn't carrying a machine gun or anything, but he looked like he was there concentrating heavily on where he was. Oh, and by the way, we were the only two down the back and Cameron sitting on the stool towards the front, and he didn't bother to even look down the back. I mean, that's not good. Nurjan was alert to all of this too, and I could see his hand going down into his shalwar kameez.
Oops.
Just telling me time is on the march.
Is it possible to put it on silence?
Yes. I didn't think it was going to do anything else.
We don't want a 7 p.m. one.
The man who'd walked in the door did a kind of phony, my ankle's gone a bit, and kind of bumped into Cameron. And that was it. We knew it was on. I'm thinking I can't get under this table fast enough, and trying to imagine how thick it is, But I'm heading for the slide. It's a really bad position for Nurjan because he can't, even if he can get to his, he had an automatic Browning, even if he can get to it, he couldn't really get it out in time. So he was joining me in the sliding down. Cameraman had been spun off his stool. This guy had a gun out. It was a revolver, much more reliable, and started shooting straight into where Nurjan's head was about a fraction of a second before. But what I was starting to think is it just some nutter that he's offended in some past life or something? Because that's not the way they do it there. Not one person. Nurjan and I, under the table, could hear that everything was. Cameron was back on his feet. He'd had to twist it. He had the revolver and twisted it. I could hear gristle and sinew go crunch, crunch. So I guess that was the gunman's hand out of the way. And we got out, and then, everything transforms. You look at where you are, and this is suddenly your bunker. The street is where the enemy is. It was twilight, evening, plenty of shoppers around, busy, noisy. Nurjan, I thought, was looking to the back, but he wasn't. He was just gathering his thoughts, I guess. And I told him there's no way out that way. We're going. And he stood up quite calmly, put his gun back into his shalwar kameez trouser pocket, but he left his hand in there. So, and started walking towards the front. Well, Kamran, his bodyguard, was having words with the former, now handless, gunman, pointing out the virtues of the butt of the gun with his face. And one of the diners seemed to have got something in the knee, but that wasn't a real concern. Nurjan, when I did offer, though I don't think he was listening to me, that, look, send Whitey out first because I'm not a target. Maybe I can see what's going on. And I was starting to think maybe that wasn't such a good idea. But he wasn't paying any attention and just strolled towards the front of the door. As I got to the front of the door, the original revolver was on the ground. I emptied that and then looked out to where Nurjan was, and then started to take in the street. Now, an ordinary evening street transforms completely into something else when you're expecting trouble. Every car has to kind of justify its purpose and existence. If it's a taxi, fine, but who's the driver? And what's in the back? Is it a real one or not? And surprisingly quickly, you can distinguish between families, shoppers, people who work in the area, people who are slinking back into their shops, people who, nobody would have been forewarned. But even I could see that there was a car about 30 feet away that had too many people in it, too many young guys in it. And another one down the other side that was also wrong. But maybe it was experience watching somebody like Nurjan, but he kept the same pace and went straight across the road to a fabric shop. Now they kept, when I say rolls, they're not really rolls of cloth. They're, I think they call them bolts, don't they? They're kind of flat pieces rolled up. And he was smiling and picking some up. But what I realized a couple of seconds later that he really wanted was some kind of body protection. He picked up 2 of these. Now, a bullet won't go through 2 of those. Well, not straight anyway. So the guy they sent into the shop fired once, then was professional enough not to waste his bullets and was trying to look for a better shot, but it was too late. Nurjan got him. Then it was a bit, a little bit chaotic because Cameron had alerted some of Nurjan's guys who always loiter about, and they met the 3 guys in the car down the road. They met them straight on and descended on them. So as they were trying to get out of the car, they kept kicking the car doors. So then, what are they going to do? Shoot their way through the car window? Time's running out. 2 that were in the other car up the other end had thought, this hasn't gone well. We've lost 2. The ones who've got the serious firepower can't do anything or can't get out of the car. And they've decided to go. But instead of going, and maybe this is wise, it's hard to say, instead of trying to get a car, there's traffic. You're not going to be able to drive away fast anywhere. This is not like a normal street. This car is now a burden. All it is a bag of evidence for somebody to pore over at this stage. Of course, we're not talking about the Pakistan and Karachi police. Their idea of fingerprints is something you carry on a piece of sticky tape that you apply to things. You don't find them off somebody. I kind of lost track a bit because I missed something I would have liked to have seen. Nurjan's men had disabled the bit of shooting, but the 3 guys in the car were out to it. The driver in that one was killed first, and they held one, but he started making a lot of screaming about something, which another one of Nurjan's men took as just a nuisance and finished him off. Nurjan came back. He must have seen the 2 that decided against going on with this take what they'd planned as a way out. There were 4 kind of alleyways that must have gone somewhere down there. And Nurjan went down, picked up one of the guns that some kind of homemade Rawalpindi gun shop, automatic, jams on the third shot type gun, and headed off down the alleyway there. And so the guy, everybody involved is starting to think, where is a good place to be in a few minutes? Because the police don't exactly rush towards anything, but they, they're not that bad. They will turn up sooner or later. I wasn't going to go down a blind alley after where Nurjan had gone. Besides which, I don't know whose noise was what, whether it was shooting or just racket. But within a couple of minutes, he came back. A little bit of claret on him there, a bit red on the old white shalwar kameez. But there was no more heard from any of those guys that went down in the alley. I just hope it was he got the right ones. And everybody was kind of starting to relax. I think there was one left alive from the car of three, if I can put it that way. And he'd been taken into one of the shops to be hidden away for later use. The other two guys, who Nurjan's men, were kind of searching around, checking people out. And you could you start to distinguish between people who are terrified, but most don't know what's going on at all. If it's very crowded and very busy, as it was, and very noisy, most people are missing everything because it's spread about and there's altercations. Some police started to turn up, but luckily it was reasonably high-ranking one who happened to be nearby, so there wasn't going to be any trouble out of that. The last thing the police would be interfering in any of this. Nurjan still had his automatic in his hand, which he then moved to put back in his pocket. And this is the factor you can never count on, some new half-wit, middle-class, non-entity policeman has walked in late on that, seen the chief of police, or it wasn't chief, but a high-ranking one, frowning because of listening to what's going on. Nurjan moving with this gun in his hand and shot him in the back. This non-entity policeman has shot him, and what was a very clear and unmissable shot in the back with his own pistol. I think the one who looked most horrified was the deputy chief of police, who almost shot this young policeman, but certainly started screaming at him. Well, this is not the place where you can just whistle up an ambulance. You've got to kind of fight your way out of that area anyway, just to get anything. And if somebody's injured, you can't throw them over your shoulder and get on a motorbike, which is just about your only way out. But cars were found, Nurjan was put in the back of it and off to the infection centre, the hospital he goes. And everybody else kind of decided they thought of something pressing that they needed to do. I checked in later on with Iftaka to see how he was, but even though all the early reports were ridiculously optimistic, he died of what is a septicemia a few days later.
The death of Nurjan after all these episodes.
I know, and in such a stupid way.
In such a stupid way?
Within 5 days, the story was already tangled. It wasn't anything like that. It was, I said to Robbie, the Scot, I said, you heard what happened? Yeah, I heard he got caught in the crossfire. I said, Nurjan is the crossfire. He's not... Anyway,
and what about the cop that did it?
I wouldn't have liked to have been him.
Oh man! After all
I
these
think
episodes, I can't believe what I'm hearing.
Yeah. He's been with us for 20 years, hasn't he? And there wasn't. I hadn't gone to the hospital apart from to get a report. And I was a bit naive still. I mean, things happen, but there's always some naivete about things.
Does that mean there's a new leader now of that clan after him? His demise, there's a new leader step up? Or is there a competition for the new
somebody
leadership?
who'd been the most significant figure for 20, 30 years. There was nobody that he'd ever led forward and said, I'm teaching this young man everything I know, or in some ways. And he spent a fair bit of time locked up as well. So
does that then sever your relationship? You had this loyalty to Nurjan, you went looking for his nephew or whatever. Does this then sever your relationship with that clan, kind of?
In a way, really, because I'd met so many of the side branches when I was looking for Iftaka that, of course, we're all human beings, and so none of us are cold enough, I guess. Bet you Donald Trump would be, to cut somebody off instantaneously that there wouldn't be any real point and only jeopardy by continuing onwards. But I kept in touch with Bits for a while, and Iftaka's still alive today. But it did make, and also here's another thing, there isn't really the same kind of leadership these days that there was then. This was just the turning of the millennium, after all. And you don't get people who kind of grown up in the edges and I don't mean intense, but certainly in rural areas and in places that are isolated. Iftaka's children are all university graduates, and they're all in businesses. Okay, you could go to a Baluchi wedding or some big family event, and you'd still see lots of people, and I have no doubt there would be somebody that would be nominally the head of the clan. But they weren't so much arch criminals and cutthroats as today that there would have been then. Though I was kind of curious about one thing, and I went to my Air Force captain friend too, because I really wanted to know whether it was that Karachi leader that I met that night that was behind it. It seemed obviously so. But I finally had some proof of that about 2 weeks before I left Karachi at all. Do you remember when I was poking around at the big little suburban summit there, peacemaking meeting in the house, and I'd found the two guys making some hooch down there and looked in the fridge, but in the freezer
Chickens.
They had these what looked like pigeons, all wrapped up in kind of cling film or something like it. And the whole issue was that people had gone missing, having signed over lots of property and were still signing over things, so they must have been alive. They were not pigeons. They were their hands. They'd been cut off, and to my quick glance, I'd mistaken the thing entirely for some kind of edible fowl. But what happens when you freeze a body part, even if it is, a light brown skin color, once frozen for a while, is not light brown anymore. And that, what is a little pigeon like to you? Just colour it white. I guess there's only so many times you can thaw it out and use a recognizable thumbprint on that one. So, if any of you are wondering who was to blame for that, well, he had to take responsibility. That guy who was the little boss of that section of, I forget the suburb's name in Karachi, but I'll think of it. He met with an accident, you will not be surprised to know. And had organised the little assassination because I think Nurjan had always known that these people were dead. It just couldn't really quite explain how they continued to be, signing for things. So he probably would have taken action anyway. So it was better to get in early. But fatally, as it turned out, it was the right place, probably the right time, the wrong people. Good assassins are hard to get. So it did kind of close down a section for me of, I wouldn't say of that life, but of that world.
You didn't get embroiled in the aftermath of his death?
Not really. I stayed in touch with only the relatives that I'd known who were kind of looking for a more peaceful life. The ones that had been, had careers, had some education. They had ambitions beyond sitting on a little pretend throne down in Balochistan somewhere. And not only that, even the ways of the smugglers down on the Makran coast had changed a bit. Instead of using those dhows and skiffs and things, they were just loading things onto containers at various ports. There was still... I had quite a good offer of an exporter of oil, palm oil and things that could go around the world, that in those tins could be whatever I liked. But I don't know, between the arrest there, being thrown in the dungeons, tortured under there, getting out of 2 cases, and everything else, and Nurjan had been my kind of last resort protector, I guess you could say. I could barely trust him, truth be told, but I knew what his outlook was, and he had a certain ability. There's nothing that I could. I still had, I guess, the forces people, and they're always pretty reliable, but they do have this kind of inbuilt policy of getting all your enemies or competitors all fighting against each other, and that can always go badly. I suppose even when in your dealings with Mexican or New Mexican mafia, is there that habit of dealing with competitors by making trouble for them and setting them against each other, or they don't make more mess than they've already got?
So, if I was dealing with one clique, I wouldn't go with the competition. I would just stay with them. Otherwise, I'd be in trouble.
But they didn't actively go out making trouble for their competitors. Or they didn't even see them as competitors.
I wouldn't have ability to have any knowledge of that. They wouldn't broadcast that if they did.
No, I suppose not. And the only way you would know is if you heard sort of odd stories about misfortunes that happened to them.
It's like 48 Laws of Power, isn't it? I know that when the Medellin and Cali cartels are going against each other, the DEA were receiving reports of cocaine on a certain ship. They were snitching each other out on the loads at one point when they were at war.
Yeah, that's not unusual. That does happen. That certainly happens amongst the Russians in dealing with stuff outside of Russia. Not so much in there because it makes a real mess. But I had also in my address book about this time the Russians that I'd met who'd have been in the Karachi and Hyderabad prison.
Oh, I love
These are the ones
stories
who,
of the Russians.
For those who don't know, Andreas had at least a dozen in his little gang. They were imprisoned in two groups because together they were too much trouble. He didn't like that. He broke out of Perm 31. I think that's like Prison City 31. Hijacked a commercial jet, gone to the other prison city, collected the rest of the gang, gone to Pakistan, had 10 years there of frolics, and I think 24 notches on the vodka bottle, 24 people dead at his group's hands, but finally sent back to Russia, into the new Russia, which was, when he'd left, it was the Soviet Union. You know, those old creepy old Kremlin guys. I think one of the Andropov was dead for a few years before they admitted it, didn't they? They used to wheel him out on
Does
May
that mean
Day.
he got a pass then if he went back to a new Soviet Union?
No, I thought they would have forgotten about it all.
Yeah.
But not so. But he didn't actually serve very long. I mean, he'd hijacked a plane. A few people sort of, died. Yeah. Died the polite way. But so in a way, I don't know. The Russian psyche is an unusual one. I think it was a bit of a reward for being having survived over there and done well and killed a few and crushed his own premolar teeth rather than submit to force feeding on a hunger strike.
Up on the macho spectrum.
So I think it was...
endured some tortures as well, didn't he?
Indeed. I think he only had about a couple of years to go by 2000. So we would meet again, as we would.
We love a reoccurring character.
Yeah.
Especially a Russian gangster.
Well, here's the thing. When this is jumping forward a bit, but when you can imagine when these old guys who were kind of under the Soviet system, you had to be a bit of a gangster there. You had to be quite tough anyway, or have a strange kind of working relationship with the police. You know, they would arrest them quite often. They were corrupt and they would take a cut. And it was rarely in money back in the Soviet era days. It was usually goods, you know, like other cooking ware or television sets or something, because everything was always in short supply. But where they couldn't really adapt was the changes that had taken place. They had missed out on the Gorbachev days, and he'd come over. What was that drunkard they had in the Russian White House for a while?
Bush Jr.
No, I'm thinking in the Russian White. They've got a
the
White
Russian
House.
White House.
Yeltsin? Boris Yeltsin? In the second half, I speak rather sadly of the girl I left behind in London, Eloise. No, it was never really going to work out. But the trails of those things linger, like dental floss that can't be flushed. Of course, I couldn't let that go on. But did I? Now that's the break, and then I'm going to go to 2 hours 39 minutes. Where I say, this is awful. I'll end this here and only include the question section, as there were some odd takes by viewers who get quite interested in the psychology of crime. They're rather technical, some of the viewers of my things, and I quite like that. But do I care about the workings of crooks and psychopaths? No, not on the job. Not as I advise you. Keep it practical at all times. What do you want from your criminal co-worker? Is he or she reliable? Can the dubious talents be directed? It may be best to look at the series How to Become a Master Criminal, and there's a link popping up now. And they should if I do a decent edit. Last thing on Russian matters. Anybody ever heard of Quora? It's one of those morning wastes of time where you poke around and somebody, rather like a politician in Parliament or Congress, asks a question which is a complete setup to get an answer that's been prepared. Anyway, that's Quora for you, and they ask themselves questions. One of the people I kind of grew to like on it was a man named Misha Fira. He writes a kind of, sad but comic pieces every day, really. He's very prolific on Moscow and Russia in general, and how the country's crumbling, and of course the corruption is mind-boggling. I noticed the architecture is interesting too. As a bit of a builder, I wonder what would happen if you tapped on those new walls. But anyway, Misha, by chance, just after I got in touch with him, he's coming to London. He's going to be at the... where is it now? Is it Monkey Business Cafe? Something like that. I'll clarify that in writing below in a minute. Anyway, it's a place, a sort of nightclub in Camden. I don't know, for less than a tenner you get 7, 8 acts for the night. And it's his first stand-up night. And I'm going to be there, or be square, because I'd like to film a bit of it. And I kind of... No, I'm not going to make things worse for him. I won't stand up. I won't get drunk and stagger on stage and try and mess with his act. I'll be the wingman, the straight man, ask the right questions. Or maybe really do him a favour and just shut up and record the event. Anyway, you'll be, well, the second, not counting the audience, probably the 33rd. Well, it's a full house. Well, you might be the 100th and something person to know all about it that night, because I'm here to report. Where are we? Oh, yeah, we're at the end. That was part 10. Part 11, I think I'll give that a bit of an edit. I was a bit wrung out. And there's some good stuff in it, but it could use an edit. We could all edit our lives, don't you think? All right. Good night, night owls, and get some sleep. The military, the US did, well, they like to tell the story that they saved him, but I think that would take some examination of the facts before believing that one. I mean, the number of times the United States has actually backed up somebody when the pressure was on them. They usually, like everybody, I guess, this lets the fight go on and see who comes out the winner. But I don't think they wanted to return to the command of army-controlled politicians. I don't know really how the political network stood up for so many years after Uncle Joe Stalin went, and Khrushchev, and all of that lot. I mean, there was nothing. Were they civilians? Yeah, sure, they weren't in the army, but the army was clearly the most powerful thing. But I think the economics of it all decided that fate. They couldn't afford they built some massive submarines towards the end. And those ones that have got the biggest submarines in the world. They've even got swimming pools inside this. And you wouldn't think having splashing around in a well, it's kind of like a jacuzzi, really. But if you're on a submarine, that's not what your idea of a break from the daily routine of
More water.
yeah. But apparently, it's quite relaxing to do that. I'd quite like one of those old subs. Splash around in it myself. So, you know the story well about the South Americans who were getting together a submarine. The guy who organized it, Misha, rang them back and the cartels and said, "Oh, one question: that this submarine you want is with missiles or no missiles?" No, we don't need the extra weight. So Andreas and the remaining guys were not. This was a completely alien world where businessmen were king, and the ex-KGBs were now, company directors fighting over the oil shares of all the petrochemicals companies, and private security was as powerful as the old KGB was, and they gave themselves a new name too. I forget what it was. It'll come to me. So they were kind of like, what would you call it? Remember the old film The Wild Bunch, where the cowboys from the Old West can't adapt to, it's 1912 or something, when they're trying to rob a bank, and the days of when you could get away with that even in the Wild West had gone. So they got hounded into the ground. And it was a bit the same way for Andreas and the guys, but not before, at least... I was going to I wanted more about this hijacking. I wanted as many of the survivors out so I could at least get a book out of it. And my notes still are wrapped up in a piece of shoestring over in the corner on all of that, called White Russians, after the cocktail. But
so you're saying Andreas didn't adapt then? He met a bad fate, did he?
He did. He didn't survive. There's only, and I haven't checked in a few years.
After going through all that, he didn't survive.
He got out of prison, and went back to various bits of mischief. But you might ask, or not, how was it I had such a clear line of communication? Did I mention? I think I did, but only briefly, that the other resident of the apartment in Karachi, apart from Robbie the Scot, was Tatiana. Tatiana was a Russian girl with little schoolteacherish spectacles. There's a picture of her flopping around on my website somewhere, if you're curious.
DavidMcMillan.com?
.net. And where had Robbie found her? Well, there were visits. The women's prison in Karachi Central was just next door. You could go there. Even you could. Robbie said, "Oh, Sunday you want to go over in the women's prison for what? See what's going on. Talk to the girls. No, day of rest. Worship the Lord and all His works." Well, I didn't need any more complications in my life, but Robbie did not mind a few complications. And one of the things he was so enthusiastic about getting all the drug runners out of prison was that he'd met Tatiana. And what was Tatiana's story? Well, she was an innocent, nice word to bandy around, but untested, sweet-natured girl who was learning English in her studies in Krasnodar, which means Red City, by the way. And she came across this tall, dark young man who wooed her over there. He was there on a visa as a kind of a student himself. Why was he there? Because that's about one of the few countries where a Nigerian guy at a loose end can get a visa. Yes. So the next thing, this was he a prince? probably the only Nigerian I've ever heard of that wasn't one. But still, they jail Nigerians, I mean. No offence to all you others. Yeah. There was a little baby came along for Tatiana in Krasnodar. So what does fearless prince, king of Lagos, decide to do? Student that he is. Why, send her and the baby over to Karachi to run 2 kilos of heroin out of Karachi and into God knows where for God knows what. I mean, I know, but it's a whole different thing amongst that group. They've got their headquarters in Rawalpindi and the Nigerian boys, and they've got their own games there. And gullible Russian girls was one of them at this stage. Yeah, it wouldn't wash any longer. But this was an era that was, I don't know. I suppose the naive people in this world remain so no matter what. There's still plenty around. You don't have to look far. So, what was the plan? Right. Send the girl with the baby. She picks up the stuff. It's in a suitcase. Go to airport. They won't go near her because it's a young woman with a baby. What could she possibly be doing there? Yeah. Well, yeah. As far as the authorities in Karachi is concerned, any policeman on the block or anybody in a white shirt and epaulets, all the Russian girls there were prostitutes, as far as they could tell. And don't go near them because they've all got AIDS. That's what they told themselves. And did it stop them? Who knows? Well, she wasn't. She was very far from that. But the sheer anomaly of what a Russian girl would be doing there with her kid was bad enough, so they stopped her. And it was so well known what the suitcases were going to look like. Sometimes it would be a flight bag, that is the captain's personal briefcase. It looks a bit square, rectangular, chunky thing. All known. They knew those. They barely even had to open the thing, and they knew it. It just defeats me how a student back in the good Soviet Union there could think this was a winnable plan. So she was in the women's prison, and she was also, like many of the people who had been originally arrested by customs, facing a second charge in the anti-narcotics court. Anyway, Robbie decided as a bit of a hobby to try and do something about this double jeopardy position, because the Constitution clearly states nobody shall be brought to trial twice for the same matters. That used to be a custom here until things changed. You can be now. But you can't in supposedly lawless countries like that. Then that might be too, because in Britain we don't have a constitution. We just have practice, what we normally do, old chap. Yeah. And that's getting pretty flexible too. I mean, a lot of those... just as an aside, did you see Lord Sumption, former head of the Supreme Court, talking about the social distancing rules? And though I don't share this opinion, in his opinion, people should look to their health first and the law second. And that's coming from a former judge of our highest court in the land.
Wow.
So we've relied on that type of person. He's got kind of long hair, a bit of a hippie, I think, as his lordship for our justice. But there they had a constitution, and Robbie decided to get involved in that. So it was only kind of natural when he arranged little Tatiana's actual prison time had come to an end, but she was still facing, like many people, this second court hearing. That got lodged in the court. I think he arranged bail, got her out. But in any event, as with my second case, they all they all disappeared when the Sindh High Court ruled in favour.
How long had Tatiana been in for at this point?
Not too bad. I mean, in real time, about 3 years, 9 months or something like that. So
she still had a life left to live.
Yeah. No, she wasn't just clinging to Robbie out of gratitude or anything. I found out years later, even though I had my cynical eye on the whole thing, that she was deeply in love with him. Robbie, in years to come, if we're still telling these stories, he left her for a Ukrainian, which might be kind of personal, nationalistic insult there, but she was sent back to Russia with the kid. No, that's right. The baby was only in there for the first 2 years. That's
the
right.
Baby?
Yeah, it was in the maternal section of Karachi Central Jail. So when I arrived at the penthouse, Tatiana was there cleaning up Robbie's act, introducing him to things like shampoos and detergents and things that he didn't think terribly much of before then. So she was part of a little social family along with Jeanette and the two girls. And it was only the day after, 36 hours really, after Nurjan's death, he was on the way to die, that I'd taken the Jeanette's two girls to the Sabzi Mandi, which is the great vegetable market of Karachi. Acres and acres of the thing. I wanted them to see what it was like for kids who grow up there. And of course, a couple of little boys ran up carrying sacks, or kind of huge holdalls to lug around your vegetables, made out of old rice sacks stitched together. And I was explaining to them that these boys were born here in this marketplace. They sleep on top of the section that sells nothing but plastic bags. And in fact, there's a famous plastic bag that was made in some huge quantities that was still around for years and turns up in every country in the world. It's like that, you remember when the container load of trainers went off some Icelandic carrier and ended up floating around in the ocean. But because they float, scientists were using the trainers to track ocean currents and got funded to what's quite an interesting study of the oceanic voyages of the Nikes and the Adidas. Note the correct pronunciation there. So back in the Sabzi Mandi, the girls kind of got distracted and wandered off. But Jeanette looked a little concerned. I mean, this was a city within a city again, as is in compounds. And will they be all right? Yeah, but I knew they absolutely would. Within this noble guild of mouldy onion sellers and they got turnips there, something like it, yams. The operations of the Sabzi Mandi were a matter of kind of pride within the families that had different parts of it. And no doubt they had their own economics and how their loans were organized and how everything was and their own hierarchy. So it was no surprise when I found that some of the bigger sellers had said to their more trusted workers, go follow the little girls around, make sure nothing happens to them. Because when Ellie came back, she was 7, she had 2 goats with her, baby kids, that she wanted. And there was a trail of about 6 or 7 rather concerned, competing deputies from the potato section or the tomato crowd and the potato lot never got on. They were always at war. And so that would be safer, really, than just in a normal street or conceivably in a hotel, probably. Whether they learned anything about life in general, about the inequality of the world, I doubt very much. Girls grow up a bit more practical and don't see anything, and especially as children, like all children do, it's just other kids are other kids. In my travels, I've been in a situation where I've had a friend's grandson, or anyway, 2 infants, really, 3, 4, 5 years old, don't speak each other's language at all, but can be seen in the garden playing quite well, communicating over the toys, and both sides nattering away in the languages that they know, but the understanding seems perfectly straightforward. Something that unfortunately gets lost as they grow up and go through the minefield of puberty and then the teenagedom of ambition before they reach the middle-aged depression of failure. But it was soon coming time when there was no point for her to stay around. There was nothing at least she'd seen her husband, alive and well, if in the clutches of the wrong people. Had arranged at least a halfway good lawyer. But what was a bit surprising to me, which I didn't find out until not long before I left the country, was how was it that now the history of this 2 tons of hash that was to go into bed sheets and be shipped in containers to the nameless country was that a bunch of London notorious crooks from families whose names you'd know, some of them had put some money into offshore operations like this, but you've got to be there. I mean, I've said before in this very chair, you go with your money because it's going to go somewhere else without you. That's for certain. How had it come to be that they'd already lost £70,000 and they were willing to have this poor David go over and stay in the worst hotel for this? He was at the Hyatt. Yeah, you can imagine. It's high profile. Everybody would want to know what somebody was doing. But that wasn't somehow, what should have been a simple sting operation ended up in a real arrest. Like, there was never any hash. I said to them, wait a minute. Did you ever see this stuff? Oh, well, I was taken to this warehouse and there it was behind. And what, you got to fondle it? Did you rip something open and smell it? What was it, Kashmiri Black or any of the other phony names we give all these things? Not really. They didn't want to interfere with the packing. Oh, I bet they didn't. Yeah. They probably begrudged buying the bed sheets, let alone anything else. So when he was arrested from his hotel, and Akbar Shah, of all people, and yet no evidence of any hash or any other drugs or anything. I tried to get from the family, from Mrs. Akbar Shah, who used to turn up from time to time at the Carlton Hotel, into Jeanette's room, pick up the phone, get onto room service, order a 4-course meal, and sit there and eat it off a mobile table that would be brought out, making quite a mess of the place. Munch that all down and then disappear. But the people that I thought were witches, it was and the one who had the hairdressing salons, the wife there, she'd given me a couple of clues. She said, it's the wife who controls everything there, the money. And when he loses money of hers, that's unforgivable. I'm a bit slow-witted. I'm not picking up the clues here. And, then another thing about how she was supposed to, really get a cut of something that he managed to squander. And how best to punish husband for some misdeed. Have him thrown in the can for a while. Yes, indeed, there was no hashish. It was just another rip-off in the making. And David had been sent there on a fool's errand and managed to get arrested. So the only leavings of this were whatever could be wrung out of his family. And so she wasn't getting any of that. And it had been intercepted by relative do-gooders such as Robbie and myself, who were making sure no more went. But the family house was sold. And it was kind of too late for all of that. But Jeanette didn't want to. She was getting these letters which were a load of nonsense about being tortured, death penalty. I said, ignore all that. Almost no Westerner gets mistreated unless he's some half-wit that's put himself in that position, thinking myself. About that, it was clear that at the time I left, that this case was going nowhere. So it was only, depends how impatient you were. David had to sit it out until this bail thing, 2 years. That's the line that people have to cross, and everybody gets it. And I think to this day that case is still unresolved, and nobody cares about it. And anyway, Mrs. Akbar Shah had stopped. Thought her husband had been punished enough, and more or less wanted him back by now, and wasn't going to get anything. And if there was going to be money coming from the Gora, the white man's family, then she's going to be damn well there in time to catch it. But she had to satisfy herself with commodious room service from the Carlton Hotel as her reward.
So did David get out then?
Yes, he did, but not for quite some months. Such affairs as they were, to settle there, I left in fairly good shape. The Air Force captain was, he was fine.
So you were out on bail and you skipped bail?
Oh, no, I hung around until the case was finally destroyed in the Sindh High Court and the prosecution withdrawn. Because I didn't want, I wanted the property that the Air Force captain's family had put up to go back to them without any fuss. So there wouldn't be a loss, and all I had to recompense people were for, the inconvenience of it. And that was done in a kind of another way. As I mentioned last time, it didn't cost me a thing. And that is the kind of lesson from there, as tough as it sounds on yourself. If you're trying to do anything in a country where people ruthlessly stand on each other and they would rather go broke in their own shop than see the shop across the road succeed, you can't pay for anything and expect to get it. You've just got to be there, make sure it happened, and then reward afterwards. And therefore you'd be welcome back. I think I mentioned before, didn't I, that there was somebody I used to be supplied by who would never mention money. And when I asked him what he wanted, he just said, well, send me whatever you want. And those good old days, of course, you could go to Wall Street Forex behind Piccadilly Tube Station and shove over all you could get in your little wheelbarrow. And it was a glorious sound, Shaun. There was nothing there except this. It was next to Planet Hollywood. Well, behind there, you could get lost in its little folds. Very womb-like. If the side doors opened, you could hear the sound of, must have been 20 money-counting machines, all chattering away happily to each other. either, £50 notes or what they call the €500 note, the Bin Laden. I think that's a journalist's invention, frankly. But I'll go with it. It sounds all right. I mean, in the world of cash transactions, I think the terrorist network amounts to absolutely nothing by comparison. Tatiana wanted to stay there even though her case was over. I wasn't going to travel back with Jeanette and the girls. They were leaving earlier. Made sure they were away and safely back home. They were home, mind you, that they'd be moving from within 3 months. I went to the Australian High Commission in Karachi. Well, they didn't really have one, the Australians. They had a honorary consul. That's a job they give normally in the Americas, North and South and everywhere. They used to give this to the local drunk they could trust or something like that, say some American guy who hadn't disgraced himself lately. And he could issue passports and whatnot. Well, I did the one for the Australians was his was a Khan, which very loosely is a clan or a tribe, you could say, the Khans, but there's so many spread all over around the world, and in India, Pakistan, that name doesn't mean anything. But he wasn't pleased to see me. I think as we sat down, I was saying that he didn't like the idea that one of the foreign national criminals would actually be in his office. And he did, well, how did you get out? And why was that? And I said, never mind all of that. Just the piece of paper with the stamp on it. That's it. I had many before and I'll have many again, but this is the one I want today. Actually, I have they've kind of centralized the processing, even by 2000 of passports. They were, up until then, your consular services could issue one. But do you know if you lose one, say you're in, I don't know, Uganda or something, and you've been drugged on a train and you wake up in a hotel room, you've got nothing, and you somehow get yourself to the Uganda, what would it be? I suppose it would be an embassy rather than a high commission. Never know. Anyway, if they are to issue with a passport now, as we speak in 2020, that gets done in London. They don't want all the foreign consular services being able to knock out their own, because the ones they would issue would not be biometric. The ones they would issue didn't even have, back in those days, any of the coded writing. On the bottom of a passport, it's got 2 streams of machine-readable text with your name on it, date of birth, but it's backwards. And if you've ever had nothing to do on a plane, you've noticed that there's an extra number in there. Well, that's a checksum. What it does is it takes all the numbers that preceded it, and to know that it's been reading them correctly, it takes that number and divides it by 7 into the other, and it should be a known figure, like 0.1. And by the way, on all passports worldwide, there are 2 checksums, one for each row, and a 3rd pair of digits at the very end, which is the checksum of the checksums. So you can decode that if you've got nothing better to do. Nonetheless, grudgingly, I was handed this thing, and then really I had to decide where to go next. I had some outstanding matters. You might recall that when I left on this long mission, it was supposed to be a couple of weeks to see where Iftaka was, but it ended up being 18 months. And as I walked out of my Bedford Gardens, Chelsea Mews house, I thought, well, David, you're only going for a couple of weeks. You've got 2 good passports, absolute rock solid there. They'll stand up under anything. do I need to do everything? Well, yes, I did. I put the keys up the drain pipe under some magnets, and also on that same key ring was a safe deposit box key, and also the key for access to a Fulham self-storage depot. So there was all the bits and pieces that somebody coming along after my fall could find what they needed. I think I'd mentioned that I had. No, I don't know. But in summary, instead of sitting out my 2 years, I got impatient for an earlier bail, and I don't know. I'd sat out and I'd put up with Thailand for 2.5 years, pointlessly, only to realize I had to escape anyway. And I came to look at jail as something like corrupt voting. Vote early, vote often. Escape early, escape often is the motto. But instead of, how I left things in their place in Sweden, there was a nice little reward for the curious, the tired, sitting in a bank there, and a whole stream of other things. An account somewhere at the Banco Bilbao Vizcaya, Argentina. All of this wonderful stuff, safely tucked away. Does not need any imbecile to interfere with it. I could have left it years, really, and probably most of it intact. No. I was in a hurry. This escape early business. And I couldn't escape from there anyway, because, as you know, I was in a position just to walk across the street. But if I'd done that, I had no chains, no handcuffs, I would have been reliant upon my friends to so-called protect me. The case would have stopped instead of gone on to a good conclusion of an acquittal as it did. So I couldn't do the obvious thing and just walk out. I had to sit it out. So I thought, I'll get bail and at least go back to Sweden and everywhere else and see everybody and try and keep everything afloat. Because I'd retired there, as you recall. Oh, and I had Eloise there as well, who hadn't heard from me for some time. Though she had tracked me down. She'd found out that something had happened, even before I got back. She'd loitered around the Muse house long enough to find out who the agents were, and then the owner. And the owner just... it wasn't exactly very... we got along well, this owner and I. I mean, he knew everything I gave him was phony, but I gave him enough money to make it good. And he said to her, getting it all mangled up, "Oh, David, fine fellow. I think, is he executed? Or soon to be. Anyway, what was it? 2 tons of cocaine in Karachi or somewhere like that. Karachi? Cocaine? What? Colston, Newcastle. Anyway, that didn't make her feel much better. I think she destroyed a couple of the gifts I gave her that night. I later found out. Because I hadn't been entirely frank with her, Shaun, as to what my occupation was. In fact, I hadn't told her at all, and in a sense she didn't want to know.
You had a question, actually, from Aaron Green. What happened to Eloise while you were gone? Were you able to get any messages to her, or did she presume you dead?
No, well, I mean, as nervous as she was, she wasn't somebody likely to give up either. Private school girl, go back on the hockey field and all of that. Was it lacrosse? Anyway, whatever. Don't let go of your puck. So she wasn't put off by the house owner's talk, and managed to find my brother somewhere who was running Cafe Productions, a film company down in Soho at the time. Now, Simon,
was he on good terms with you?
Well, very cynical terms, you could say that. I mean, I'd couple of times I stayed out in Finsbury Park at his place there when coming back from someplace horrible. And we've always got along, but he never until I think he's almost disappointed that I retired. No more interesting things happen. But he's at the coalface of the film business because the makers of things get very little reward. It's only the deal makers of things who do it right. But he did find. Oh, he did tell me when I spoke to him by smuggled mobile phone from Pakistan in the jail, and then later, some girl came looking for you, David. What kind? Oh, English, quite pretty. Seemed quite smitten, don't know why. Anyway, I straightened her out on that. What do you mean? And by what method of traducement, Simon, did you do that task at your hands? Oh, I told her it was pointless. I'll never change. Well, you don't, do you? And if she hung around, she'd only find herself in trouble one way or another, or alone, mostly. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's good of you. You want to work for the UN or anything like that? You know what brothers are like? I mean, I think they relish sometimes the opportunity to make their fellow brother's life miserable. So none of the kind of feedback that Eloise was getting was particularly helpful, and it wouldn't be until I left the country in a very roundabout fashion, and I'm trying to remember exactly which bit of mischief I was up to. I was up to some, that's for sure. Oh, yes. Oh, you've got it now. I just placed all the connections. Everything in Sweden was smashed to bits by my Australian bank robbing friend who'd come to help me. Why? Because he'd broken every laboriously rule into his thick head. He might have been a loyal fellow, and he was. And that's the thing. If you in a crisis, you need a helper, you're getting a trickster or an honest man. And if it's an honest man, how bright is he? Will he be able to see through things? No, not at all. He's gone, extraordinarily enough, all the crap that I'd done before. What if somebody else had to get into my bank account? What if I needed somebody to get into the safety deposit box? All of this stuff worked. And I thought I was only doing it as a good luck charm. David, if you do all this preparation, this 2-week trip won't go badly. It'll turn out quite well. And all the precautions, as usual, will be the B plan that you never have to need. Well, I didn't leave it. So by the time he'd left keys lying around and got himself arrested, he was 3 months in solitary in Sweden on suspicion, which they do in Scandinavian countries. I wonder whether they're still up to it. I suspect they are. They can hold you incommunicado for months.
Wow.
And it's only the judge that stops that by saying, all right, put up or shut up. Well, in his case, his real name was Harry, but I can't remember what I called him in the book, but you'll know who he is. It's the same guy I sent down to lift me out of the a court date in Bangkok in Thailand. And his job was to had a special lift there for an elevator that would take prisoners down into the dungeons, but it only had 2 guards in it and only that prisoner. So you could work out when the person you wanted to pick up was in there. Simply, there were 2 floors of the new court building. I mean, it was a modern kind of high-rise office thing in Thailand. that were unused, pending more trouble or something. So somebody would only have to press that button and open it up. But Harry, in any event, didn't like all those machine guns down in the outside. But he wasn't through wrecking my life there. He had a job to do in Sweden, which he managed to do. Lost all the stock.
Because he had the coke in that little box, didn't he, or something?
He had some lame idea of smuggling something himself, but that went nowhere. He was, nobody will ever guess it's in a porcelain statue, he said, as though there hadn't been 100,000 movies with things in broken statues. And I think they only did that as an effect for because it looks so good when smashed on the ground by policeman, villain, private detective, whatever else is in the drama. So I was going back to a fair amount of wreckage from him. He'd gone back to his old career, at least in the bank robbery. It's fairly straightforward. You go in there and making a withdrawal without an account. But it didn't work out to his favour in the long run. Getting spotted casing someplace by an off-duty detective and shot in the chest. He survived that one, but the and was taken and got away and patched up a bit, but ended up dying of cancer some years into a prison sentence that followed all that.
Is this leading you to have a adventure in Scandinavia?
Yes.
Shall we save that for the next ep? Because we've gone over 2 hours and we've got questions.
Okay, because where we head to next, I arrive back in Europe. I restore my fortunes for the third or fourth time, I forget which. And my new bunch of friends are all from Denmark. And we go to Christiania, the hippie enclave there. And also, at some point, some years after that, the Russians appear again. I know you're very fond of the Russians. Andreas.
Tatiana?
Tatiana, yes. She didn't join us. She was a bit scared to come anywhere near it all, but she provided the communications link. And so for those who thought there'd been too much time spent in Pakistan, and there were times when I felt the same way myself, we are moving on now into what we delude ourselves into thinking is a more civilized place in the world, Western Europe, where Russians again appear, only under another guise. Oh yeah, I haven't even told that story about the ship.
Good. We want more stories. Endless stories is exactly what we want. Are you ready for your questions?
Okay, far away.
There's not a lot. These are just all the questions that came under the last episode. So if you're watching this and you have questions for David, please put them under this episode and I will print them out like this. Could Lord Nurjan not have gotten you out of Hyderabad prison?
Hyderabad.
Hyderabad. Yeah.
Yes, but as I was saying, physically getting out is a nothing. Anybody can do that. I mean, you could leave from the courts at any time. But you go from one prison into another. Whoever took you out, will they be as kind a hosts as the ones you previously had? Doubtful.
Could you employ David as international advisor to the Middle East, Shaun, and send him off on a last couple of adventures?
That might have come through. I put up a video a little while back about the devil's advocate, how it was much more interesting to imagine yourself as the defender of people we've vilified in the past. And I mentioned poor old Gaddafi, the best-dressed dictator of North Africa. Don't you think he was? He had an Italian designer, very snazzy, I must say, as dictators go. And also, poor old Saddam Hussein. I mean, he had very poor advisors. Do you know Kuwait was slant drilling into Iraqi territory for their oil? Naughty. But not only that, Iraq was, a gold mine for good PR. It wasn't a kingdom. He could organize freedom fighters in search of democracy infiltrating down into Kuwait. He would have seemed like Bush Sr. and the Contras, throwing a bit of money into those who seek freedom and democracy. It never occurred to him, of course, but so that's where the idea of being a negotiator in the Middle East would be. But I don't know. Sometimes it's an unlucky thing. You conclude a successful negotiation, the next minute some halfwit leaves, 600 tons of nitrates or something down by the port in Beirut, and half the city's flattened. So that is one unlucky town, Shaun. If you ever go there, people, take an hour's journey north to Juni. It's like a mini little Paris of the East. Oh, without the metro train station that smells like pee, which you can't avoid in Paris. Mind you, every street in Paris smells like pee, doesn't it? Food's good, though.
JC asked, what's the biggest touch you had, Dave?
Well, being alive today, I suppose. But I don't know. I suppose most of us would say, well, that was the night such and such, and I didn't get caught. But really, something, I guess, I can think of a candidate from something. All right, let's imagine, viewers, that you are sober and you have the job of customs inspector. And I had my chosen container had some boxes within it, and it was one of these kind of stereo amplifiers, but it was metal. And in their toolkit at Heathrow Terminal 3, was it 2? Anyway, they're all joined up. They didn't have an Allen key of the right size to unscrew the retaining lugs. I very seriously much doubt that that would be a problem those days. I mean, 30 years ago, Allen keys were fairly rare. Now they're in every crappy screwing kit that you buy from the local shop. So because they couldn't go that extra quarter inch, they let me go with it. And I disappeared onto the taxi rank thinking, not that one. No, not any of them. Got down onto the tube system. And back in those days, you couldn't follow anybody in those things. There weren't enough cameras. There wasn't a system. Now, I mean, you can imagine it's possible to follow somebody every inch of the way on the underground, and probably most of London for that matter. Not that the surveillance state bothers anybody now, with people worrying about their health all the time. Any kind of intrusion is seemingly welcome. People fretting about not being tested, worrying about in fact being tested. They've got other things to concern themselves, not the intrusion of the state. You know what I want for Christmas, Shaun? I want my COVID Marshal's hat.
COVID Marshal?
The moment I heard that we're going to get Marshals, I thought, oh, well, that'll be something to go on the head. And do you think I'd need, if I was trying to do COVID marshalling stuff, and breaking up a crowd or whatever it is, do you think they'd take me seriously in the hat, or would I need a horse as well? Or do you think the horse and the hat gets hoisted by 12 young drunks straight into the Thames? It's possible. But the hat would float. I
think you'd need Mao's little book to be taken seriously. I'm curious if David ever had any relationships with any lone and literal insects or arachnids while imprisoned? ? If so, did they teach him anything worth commenting on or give a sense of connection via anthropomorphism in times of isolation and need?
Oh. Well, we all recall that
Great question.
Papillon ate his insects for the protein. And in fact, Martin, the scientist who was in the Bangkok jail, recommended to leave the weevils in the brown rice because that would be added source of protein. I didn't entirely go that route. Sent out for my food. It would be tempting, wouldn't it, if you had no other company to cultivate a relationship with an insect. But don't you get the slightest sense there that there's something, it's a bit isolated? I mean, I think this person's been on self-imposed lockdown for a bit long. But having said that, I've always been fascinated by the termite mound and its hierarchical structure, and the fact that it has air conditioning. Can you believe it? These 9-foot mounds out there in Australia and Africa. The structure of them has got vents in them which circulate the air and keeps it cool. And they're built in a kind of slither like that old high-rise, so that one side gets the sun and the other side doesn't all day. And the difference in temperature creates this circulating air system. Now, it shows you, doesn't it, that the guy's obviously an insect man, whoever it was. That they have no idea what they're doing, and yet they together do this stuff. And even though they're more religiously inclined will browbeat me for this, that natural selection will favor those who do stuff, even if they don't know why they're doing it, because they will survive, pass on their genes, and there'll be more of them doing the stuff that they still don't understand. It's like having children today, I suppose. But so unthinking things can do thinking stuff, but that kind of spoils it for me, Shaun. Once I know that, if we made a little wind-up toy, and it was all clockwork, but we gave it 6 basic rules. The main one is, if you hit something that way, turn off in any direction you like. When you feel you're low on power, go back to keep moving around until you go over the area that's the recharge one. And, oh, by the way, if something hits your sensor there, you close your little jaws and then go back to the charging station and let go of the jaws. Now, this is completely unthinking. But when we look down on it, humans, have this anthropomorphism, to which he refers, thinking, oh, they're smart. They're running around collecting things and dropping them in a hole. And when they get tired, they go back for a little rest over in their spot. And when they bump into each other, they go around it. And they don't know shit. But perhaps we're just the same viewers, that we don't know anything either. But we're the inheritors of our genes, so we seem to feed ourselves in the morning.
If you want to read about my relationships with the cockroaches in the jail, it's in my book Hard Time, which is free to download at my website. And I did now have a transgender prisoner friend who had a pet tarantula called Dog, but that's documented in Prison Time.
Why did he name it Dog, by the way?
I don't know, to be honest. We kept it in a box and fed it crickets and insects and things like that.
A cockroach?
The tarantula.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
What's the lifespan of a tarantula, by the way?
What's the last?
Lifespan of a tarantula.
Well, if you're a man and you've just had sex with a woman,
sure,
it's not very long. Because in Tucson, they come out during a certain season, and cognizant of the fate, sometimes the sexual organ is snapped as the poor fellow runs for his life and leaves the sexual organ in the female.
No, I can see that. Choice between having a wangle or not, or dying. Leave it. It never can do any good anyway. It only got me in trouble.
And I'm obsessed with insect battle videos on YouTube, which did because they kind of like just
like
play
staghorn beetles.
They play one after the other, like tarantula versus scorpion. But it did lead recently to a praying mantis video that was just auto-suggested by YouTube, and it showed the female has a chemical spray that makes the male want to reproduce with her, and she will also eat the male. But in this video, she couldn't wait to eat the male afterwards, so she just cut his head off, so he was completely decapitated, released the spray onto the male, and he jumped right on her and reproduced.
Oh, even headless.
Headless.
I think people that will confirm what a lot of women have felt about men anyway. Even they would have their primary function even headless.
Girl power.
That spray is quite unnecessary in many cases that I know of. Of course, if there was a reverse one, well, perhaps it's in the air all the time. One never knows. I see. So that's ever since your relationship with your own cockroach, you've kind of been drawn towards
the masses of them.
Yeah.
You do learn their traits and how they.
Why do the insides all look like porridge when you step on them? Is that what they've been eating, or is just what their guts?
Anything like nail filings, earwax. Earwax is like honey to them. They try and get in your ears.
Did you ever find anything they wouldn't eat?
No.
And there was no fighting them. You couldn't have a.
It didn't matter how many you killed. They owned the building, so. Like people would smash them in the daytime when they'd see them out, but at nighttime they were just everywhere.
What about sealing up the holes where they came out?
Yeah, with toothpaste. I did that once. I used all my toothpaste, and then I got moved to another place that had even more of them.
What, toothpaste mixed with toilet paper or something?
Yeah,
to make it kind of weird.
Kind of cement it. But the Amerifresh toothpaste that Sheriff Joe Pye was giving us was years later found to have been made in China with some toxic antifreeze ingredients in it.
To give you clean teeth.
And it made the cell smell minty fresh when the cockroach cracks were cemented.
Don't you find it's interesting that amongst prisoners with little time, nothing but time to experiment with all the objects, can use things like toothpaste in so many ways.
Yeah.
How many posters have you seen put up with toothpaste?
Yeah.
Plenty. And when it dries out, if you go into another cell, your first job is to scrape all this old toothpaste off the walls.
On the tables in the day room, you could actually do a starting line with toothpaste on one end, a finish line with toothpaste on the other end, and have cockroach races and gamble on the winner.
Did you have to mark the top of your cockroach with
What I didn't notice was they don't exactly go in straight lines. They do a lot of looping and banging in.
And they didn't climb over the barriers and cheat. You need quite a tall one for that.
Well, they communicated with chemical smells, because when we threatened them or smashed one, chemical smells would be released. Then warrior ones would run under the cell door.
Right. Looking all angry at you.
But the worst was the babies, because the eggs were in a little piece of a worm. It looked like a piece of a worm.
Yeah.
And the females carried this. And they'd lay it under your bunk or on a book. If you didn't notice it, then all the little ones were everywhere.
So, I mean, when they hatched, were they recognizable as what they were, or did they have
tiny little
intermediate
ones,
stage? Oh, they look
like little bumper cars just going round and round on the wall.
It's sad, really, to think that such detail is remembered so clearly. Yeah.
Killing them is nigh impossible, because
they
fake death. So if you smash them, and you're reading a book, and you look over, and it's gone because it's reformed. Or when you throw them in the toilet, they go like this in the water, like they're dead, but they're actually just holding oxygen to themselves.
Oh yeah, they can't they?
Yeah,
there's enough surface tension to keep breathable amounts there, and they breathe through their skin anyway, or carapace.
Hardy little buggers.
They kind of remind me. When I was a kid, there was a comic book, and it had, in this issue, we've got for you flat bugs. Oh yes. Now, flat bugs, they were drawn on, of course. have these characteristics. When you look at them, they stay absolutely still, and they're not called flat bugs for nothing. When you feel across them, you can't even discern that they're not completely flat.
Not as exciting as sea monkeys, then.
No. What the hell were sea monkeys? I remember bringing a few to life.
Some little thing that we had as
and
kids.
They came dried as packet, and they came back to life. I know. You know, there's this week a story of on Venus, discovery of phosphine, I think it is, a gas normally only produced by biological life. And the speculation, is it there or isn't it there? Given the fact that some kind of DNA replicating life in very basic form appeared on Earth a mere 300 million years after the volcanic eruption settled down to a degree, that's pretty damn quick in planetary terms. Nobody will be surprised when it turns out our entire solar system is riddled with microbes of one kind or another. Just that it's only here we ended up having television, and probably if eventual probes and things will reveal that we are all not even, our ancestors are not even cockroaches, which will turn out to be quite a sophisticated thing. I don't even know when anybody thinks that's going to be a surprise, but they are. I've had, by the way, I noticed on being a YouTuber now that you can look up in the comments section things that have been withheld as inappropriate, or all the spam ones are pretty, and people are a bit thick out there. They're the ones that might get filtered from yours, but comments that are clearly a link to go to this website and there's girls all over it. And people have come back and said, this guy sure knows a lot of girls, because they use it in a YouTube viewer's name at each time. And it'll sound like a real name. But so they haven't even really worked out that, no, spammers get thousands and thousands of accounts just so they can post comments. And I think the human being only comes in to start the account, and that's it. Everything else is probably on a program to just comment to everything to make that link. But I made some remarks about what would life be like for, what was his name? A really bad name for a serial killer with a gun. Brenton Tarrant or something. Australian, went to New Zealand and ended up making a mess of a mosque there. And his gun had all sorts of things written in Tipex on it that referred to conflicts.
Oh, did he film himself?
Christianity, yeah.
I remember
live
that.
streamed and all of that.
Yeah.
And the speculation was, what would life be like for him in the Supermax? Well, he's going to Delta Wing in Auckland, which I think he'll remain there. It's a fairly new high security prison. And I think he'll be there for the duration. I expect he'll end up getting fan mail, and probably just for something to do, we'll have a prison marriage from some sad case. But amongst the comments was because I seem to be taking a negative view of a man who'd killed people he didn't know, 51 of them.
51 he killed?
Kill them simply as sort of some imagined revenge on Islamist terrorists, as though there was some connection between that and the people he killed that day. No, I mean, as I'd said, if he'd infiltrated himself into Syria and taken out an ISIS conclave, I think he'd be a little more respected than having stumbled into somebody's church session. But amongst the comments were, you anti-white piece of shite. I like the little rhyme there.
Anti-white piece of shite.
And something or other about, Islam-loving fucker or something like that. Anyway, so I retrieved it from the bin because it had been held aside and thought, no, it can go up there. I don't want to be seen as, censoring negative comments. Don't get too many, but anyway, don't you find that if somebody takes an unreasonable stand against you, that your defenders will sort them out?
I have moderators who just block and remove.
Oh, do they? But out there in the...
As Joe Rogan says, the comments can become a cesspit.
I'll bet. I don't know how that guy has the energy to stay alive. I mean, there's 2-hour interviews every day, aren't there?
Well, he just got paid $100 million, so that's incentive enough.
Did I say there was something bad about that? Look, let's keep this thing. Well, there you are. It's whereas for anything remotely in a comparable figure for a person who appears doing something on a media venue, you'd have to go back to what anchor persons were paid by the big networks, ABC, NBC, so on. Back in we'll go back to the 90s perhaps. I think when I was in Pakistan, I had the greatest trouble convincing a local that I forget what her name was now, but she was on ABC's Today Show, morning one. The woman who was the anchor for that one, she was on quite a lot of money a year, 24 million or something. But it was an exceptional thing. But somebody from outside of our world couldn't imagine. They'd see somebody on television that's like an actress.
I just heard a headline that Rogan is hosting the presidential debate on his podcast.
Is he?
I don't know if it's confirmed.
I'll tell you
but
what, I suppose we shouldn't take sides, but I always do. And I'd like to see Trump return to the White House. Now,
you're going to get some trolls on the back of that.
Perhaps so, but look at it this way. If you could say the whole world is subject to whoever the American president is. But you give, even the people you don't like, give them a second term. I mean, look, people didn't like Obama, but they gave him a second term, see whether he actually gets one piece of legislation through. Did he? No, I don't think so quite. Healthcare didn't even quite make it by the end. But, and poor old Joe Biden, well, he's not going to make it. He'll stagger through maybe a first term, and then, what's her name? Comet Meteor? Kamala? Coming in your face. I don't know, Kamala something.
Commodus.
Anyway, the woman that's running for vice president with him. That's who would be president. And she is marginally more interesting than Joe is, but Joe's got to be one of the most boring politicians. Had quite a tragic life. Various things have gone wrong, and he's been through all of that. But he is a dull human being.
We need to reintroduce the Roman Empire method. Praetorian guards just wipe you out if you don't perform very well.
It's true. Nothing like
Perhaps they'd take things a bit more seriously.
Palace intrigue. And you need a second term to sort of see what you're made of. Who can think of one-term presidents that are even remotely memorable? I think George Washington had 2 and said, "That's it. I'm not doing another one."
It's one of the few that look like they've not aged from it. All the others have really aged a lot.
That's true. I mean, Lincoln did, but he had pretty good reason. And I think he, if you look at the old photographs of him, he had a few things on his plate. Having to run a big telegraph office for a start. Then people have come from the war. They don't really. People might remember Truman, Eisenhower. Oh, Kennedy was such a great loss. Well, was he? We'll never know, will we? He started the Vietnam. Well, he let it get started, and it was LBJ Johnson who had to deal with it, and it was a mess. So Americans, don't be too quick on the trigger to get rid of the fool you've got, because you could get somebody who's much less entertaining. Yeah.
See, we don't just bring you true crime stories, we bring you science and political wisdom.
That's true, or half-witted advice that you're at liberty to ignore completely, because if you're brave enough to have weathered it out to this section of the interview, we're into, over 2.5 hours. And you really should get some sleep, honestly. You're not looking too well. You look pale.
Especially if you're watching this on premiere in Australia, which is probably the middle of the night.
Yeah, and they really have good internet, according to my daughter who lives there now. Very poor signal. Yours go out in high definition, don't they? Yes, they do.
They go out in whatever definition these guys do them in.
I see you prioritize your concentration on content rather than the technicality.
Yes, content creation. All my life is just all content creation now. How are your new projects coming? When can we expect to see? Well, James has got the
Epstein
Savile
book
documentary coming up. UK's Hidden Shadows Part 2.
Well, Part 1 was received very well.
It was received very well, but this is all content we have never shown before.
In Part
exclusive. 2? Well, I imagine about 90% of it is going to be exclusive interviews.
Wow.
Yes.
That's worth staying up for.
Yes. And it's going to be twice as long, do we reckon, as the first one? 3 hours plus.
That's dedication, because I've noticed in the YouTube analytics that most people drop off after 10 to 15 minutes. Now, we don't know that they don't come back.
Of a video, how long?
Well, of kind of any video up to an hour, they might.
Up to an hour?
Yeah. The much longer ones, you can get to 30 minutes. But I think if they like it, they come back and pick up where they left off.
Yeah, you've got.
I don't think that counts as well.
There's a hardcore group of followers who just watch absolutely everything all the way through.
Yeah, there are a few. I've some bits of some of our old weekly chats.
Oh yeah, I've retrieved the laptop that I did the editing of those on, so I need to go and see if the earlier ones are still on that.
Yeah, a couple of they're warmly received, and I top and tail them.
I really enjoyed that. It was fun.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I've been ever looking since then to find somebody. And I've had a couple of Skype calls with somebody, and I've nodded off during the day. Right? Yeah. Just without the ability to go off in a completely unexpected direction, which you have.
Yeah.
I'm even thinking of getting an unemployed actor to not to pretend to be anything other than an unemployed actor, but one that's alert enough for that. So,
at least those classics are on your channel. And I urge people to go down to David's channel and check them out and subscribe. We did weekly coronavirus chats full of black humour. And
that's still around on my channel, as probably now 30 little bits of deranged advice and half-witted observations, and some that are frankly an embarrassment. But if you'd like to see me embarrassed, watch my channel.
I'd also recommend you watch David on Danny Dyer's Deadliest Men.
Well, would you recommend such a thing?
Scratch that. No, I recommend you watch David in his movie, Made in Australia. What was it called?
Oh, that one. Yeah, The Man Who Got Away.
The Man Who Got Away.
And
I love the bit at the beginning where it shows David as the child TV presenter.
They were very much searching for an original of that. And in those days, you couldn't take away the tape of a video recording because they reused it all the time. Big 2-inch stuff it was with a spinning helical head.
We'd love to stuff some of that into one of these YouTube videos.
But they called a kinescope done of it. They film the TV and you get a copy on film.
Yeah.
But it was about 10 times my kid wages at the time to get one done. They all promised to, but I learnt at 12 years old that showbiz world were very empty promises there. And, I probably would have slept with Uncle Hormone, or Uncle Norman, he was, the child kid presenter, to get a copy. But, even that would have been a disappointment. I'm not walked by all the things that happened to me. Won't catch me on something saying to a court, changed my life, that grope I had on a bus. Oh, and never got over it. 12 million, please.
David has 2 books out, Escape and Unforgiving Destiny,
yes,
which are available worldwide on Amazon in ebook and paperback formats. But if you want a special signed copy, he's on
I'll do that for you.
Every
I'll
week
have
he's
to
doing
have
that.
a little bit of your character in that. So you need to tell me something about how you see the world, what your worst moment was, what your best moment was, what you do with godlike powers.
For our fans on the Isle of Man, we have bad news, and that is that due to coronavirus restrictions being tightened, it's already in a state of 14-day quarantine. We are unable to do the November Isle of Man event.
I was looking forward to
cancelled.
that too.
I know, would have been a good
Never
gig.
been there. All sorts of Isle of Man things keep coming.
Yeah.
Oh, a couple of fans from there as well.
Yeah.
And
we're trying to reschedule those for August 2021.
what's that on the basis that they'll all be vaccinated away, I suppose, by then? I hope so.
I don't think there's a basis.
No, it's just far enough away so that nobody can imagine thinking of it.
Plan anything.
All right then, people. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and there's quite a bit more to come. So don't, if you want any more of the juicy bits explained or something, just let us know. And Shaun will be happy to probe deeply with questions along those lines, won't you?
Absolutely. And we're just halfway through the 20 episodes David is contractually obligated to provide to us. So
What, for cab fare and a donut? See, I'm a cheap date. That's why I'm here all the time. Yeah.
if you've just stumbled upon this video by chance and you've not seen the previous episodes, at the top of the description box below this video is a link now to David's playlist. There's multiple clips.
Yeah, lots of things.
And there are all of the podcasts. So I've put them all now in order, 1, 2, 3, 4 at the top of that playlist. So you can just go all the way down there, spend a whole week.
I think some of them might need a slightest tidy up. Some of them do run on to 3 or 4 hours of something else. I don't know. Test pattern.
Some of them are 10 hours long. We've added a few extra Davids on there, so you don't even have to get up off your seat to click over to the next one.
True enough.
Also in the description box are links to David's YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
You're not on Twitter or anything, Facebook or anything?
I haven't got a life as it is. God is trying to tell me not to leave my little studio and get down to the things I should be doing, writing other stuff. I had the idea
Content creation.
Yeah, I know, of finding mystery thrillers from the 1920s and reading them out. Who's got onto that? Anyway, the usual suspects. But what His Highness does to me is gives me the shittest jobs to ever come into creation. I was taken down to some dump where this guy said, look, it might not look like much. And there's a lot, this is for to make sure the building stands up, to somehow stop the leaks, and to make it look presentable to renting out room at a time. The slumlords do all of this. So they hire me. Now, the whole building was listing to one side. It had a crack in some place. I think some woman died on the 3rd floor. The supposed laminate goes squish, squish, squish under my feet. To get up there, I'd probably kill myself. It's the Almighty telling me to shun all of those jobs. But I get them all. So lure me on with a few shekels more, and so that my other half can go squander it at the Ivy. The restaurant's not that good on Blackheath. That's all right. Oh, they make a nice... what is it? Fish stew, I guess, if you like that kind of bouillabaisse thing. But I've got, I'll have serious questions to ask for my output on all of that. But still, I live in hope.
Also in the description box.
Are we ever going to get past this? Seems to be a problem with the description. There's the answer to the riddle of life on Earth in the description box, and also why the number 42 has astrological significance. There's a link to that.
In the description box.
You won't stop,
I've
will
lost
you?
where I am with the description.
There's everything
Socials.
conceivable.
There's our socials.
What?
Well, social media links.
Oh, yeah. Like, if you're really desperate, you can go on to getting snatches of abuse and advice from, what is it, Facebook, Twitter. What do you...